So you might have noticed more and more on my channel that I'm posting Discord style comedy videos. These videos typically consist of multiple characters sending messages to each other, and it's kind of inspired by the Beluga YouTube channel. Now, one of the issues with making these videos is once you come up with the script of what everybody's gonna say, you then have to type each message in Discord, screenshot it, and save it. And this takes quite a while and is really a nuisance. So as somebody who knows a little bit about Python, I thought, well, why not just automate this process? And so today I'm going to show you a library that I wrote where you give it a script, a text file of messages that people send back and forth to each other, and it will automatically generate the messages in a Discord style format. So once you've cloned the repository off of GitHub, I have a terminal here. You need to install all the required packages. So pip install /r, it'll loop through this requirements.txt file. For me, I of course already have everything installed, so everything looks all good. The scripts that you actually open in the generate.py function and convert to Discord messages have to be of a specific format. When you have multiple people talking to each other, you have the name of the person, a colon, and then each message is basically on a new line. And then when you go to the next person, it's a blank line. And sometimes I want to add in little comments to the script to remind myself to do something in the video. And for that, I add a hashtag and then something, for example, that I want to do while I'm editing the video. And when this is sort of looped through in the script, the Python script, it'll just ignore any line that has a comment. You'll also note that each person has a name, and you need a profile picture for each person when you're generating Discord images. And so for that, there's the profile pictures repository here. You'll note that I already have some pictures here for each person. All you need to do if you're generating your own script is give the name of the person as it shows up in the script file, and then the corresponding name of the image that you want to load as their profile picture. So for example, here I have billy.png, and that's what I give here in the JSON file. And anything you want to add, you would just add a comma and then enter a new entry, for example. When all that is established, you can open a new terminal, for example, and here it will automatically open in the folder that you're in. All you have to do is python generate chat.py. That's the main Python file. I can run this and it'll open a folder like this. It will prompt you to select a script. So I'm going to select the script that I want. I'll open this. You'll note that a new folder will be created called chat here. And it starts to generate images. It's running. It takes about 5 seconds, and you can see that it has now generated images for the entire chat. And I can open them, and you see that it's truly in the Discord format that you want. And once you have these images, you can upload them to any video editing software you want and play around with them. Now, some of you are probably interested in how this script works. How do you automatically generate images and save them? How do you open that prompt to select a file? This is all stuff that's really easy to automate in Python. It's a little bit different than, of course, my scientific computing videos, but I think it will be interesting to people who want to build applications like this. So the library is a little bit unique today. This is Pillow. It's an image processing software. I have Pillmoji here. This is something that allows you to insert emojis when you're generating image files. System, date, time, OS, these are pretty basic. tkinter is the library that allows you to prompt a user to open a file. And then JSON is used to load that JSON profile picture file. So the question is, how do you actually create an image? And it's sort of a step-by-step process to build up an image. So here I'm going to define basically the background of each Discord message. It's sort of that long rectangle that you're used to seeing. The width is 1,777 pixels. The initial Y height is 231. What that means is that if you send a single message, that's the Y height. But of course, that box need to get bigger as people send more and more messages. So that will grow depending on the number of messages. The spacing, each time you send a new message, it grows by 80 pixels. And then here I define the heights depending on how many messages you send. So this is just an array here, world heights. If I look at it, I can look at this and you see that there's different heights depending on how many messages you send. So this is 1 message, 2 messages, 3 messages, etc. I also define the background color as well. So then it's really easy to create a template image. I call it template here. It's image.new. That's the imported library. The size is going to be like the X size and the Y size. In this case, I'm dealing with the size if you're dealing with just one message. So the width and the height. and then you also specify the color, and that creates basically a template. And of course there was an error here because I forgot to import my packages. So I can rerun that, and I now have a template, and I can look at the template, and it shows basically a blank image like this. And we'll put the profile picture here, the name, the time the image was sent, and the text as well. So the next thing we'll do is we'll add the profile picture to the side. And you note that in Discord, a profile picture is a circular image. So the width of the profile picture is 120 pixels. That's going to be like the diameter of the circle. So that's a parameter that I'll define. So now we need to actually open the profile picture. I give the name of the file here, the directory it's in. I open it using the image library, of course, giving the file path. And the image, of course, like any image that you put in there, could be unspecified size. It could be a really small size that's like 100 by 100 pixels, or it could be like 1,000 by 1,000 pixels if it's really high resolution. And so what we want to do is we want to resize it so that it's a size that fits on the template. Remember, the template has a width of this, for example. So the width of the picture is going to be 120 pixels. So I resize it so that the height and width of this pixel are the size that is approximately the size we want on the picture. So if I look at profile picture, you can see that it's loaded a square, and it should be 200 pixels in width, which if we look at it, it is indeed. So of course, in the Discord message, we want the profile picture to show up as a circle, not a square. And so the question is, how do you do this using the Pillow library? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to create a mask, and the mask is going to be basically a mask of ones inside the circle and zeros outside the circle. And what we'll do is we'll create a new image using Pillow. This is the mode. Don't worry about that. Just that's the mode for creating a mask. And we'll feed in so that it's the same dimensions as the profile picture. So right now it's just, filled with all zeros, and we have an empty mask object. So then what we do is we create a draw object, and the draw will allow us to put some ones on this image. So that will fill in the circle. So what I'll do is I'll draw an ellipse. Its top corner is going to be at the 0, 0 coordinate, and it's going to have the width and height. So it's an ellipse, but the two axes are the same, so it's basically a circle. And I'm going to fill it with the value 255. So 255 is the largest pixel value. And if I look at the mask now, you can see that I have an image that's the same size as the profile picture, where the inside of the circle is 255 and outside is 0. So it creates effectively a mask of a circle. Now what we do is we paste the profile picture on the background template using the mask. So we have that background template, that large rectangle. We have our profile picture, which is a square, and the circular mask. So here I give the position that I want the profile picture. It's at 3645. The way I came up with this location, by the way, was I experimented with different numbers, and I moved it until it was approximately in the right location. So then it's very easy. I take my template object, which is the large rectangle. I paste the profile picture, which is now just a square, at the location that I want it on the large template. And I use the mask so that anywhere where the mask is equal to 0, so basically outside that circle, it doesn't paste those values onto the template. So as you can see, after I run this and look at the template, it's properly pasted this image on the template without having those square boundaries. So the next thing we need to do is add text to the template. We want the name, we want the time, and we want the messages. So what we'll do is we'll create a editable template object. This basically allows us to draw on the template. Like, I know we did it up here like this, but when you're dealing with text and stuff, it's good to deal with these editable template objects. So here I create a new object, and it's basically a object that allows us to draw on the template. So if I look at this, this isn't actually a separate image, but it's just something that allows us to communicate with the template and add text to it basically through this object. So we'll start by adding the name. So the name position, of course, these are the coordinates of where the name shows up. Again, I got these values by playing around with different numbers and putting it approximately in a location that looked good. The font color is going to be pure white for the name. Again, that's also something that if you look at the Discord messages, I thought, okay, well, it's approximately white. So I put that as the color. The font size is 50. Again, something I played around with. And now for the font type. So Discord has a very specific font type. And actually, I have those saved in a folder here called fonts. And so the font type for the Discord name is, I thought it looked, I sort of had to Google this for a bit, and there was different answers, but the one I thought was the closest was Whitney Medium. So that's one of the fonts I have here. An OTF file is something that you can download on your computer, and it allows it to access that particular font. So that's how I specify the name font. I use the image font library, which is part of Pillow. That's something I imported above. I load the font and I put it at the font size that I want, which is 50. And the text I'm going to put on is Billy. Then it's really easy. I take my editable template, .text, I put the position of the name, the text that I want, so Billy, the font color, and then the specific font that I want. And so I run this cell, and once I add this text, I can look at template, and sure enough, the name shows up where I want it. So the next thing in a Discord message is you want to show the time that the message was sent next to the name. And so for this, again, we need the right font, we need the right color, we need the right size. So this is the font size, the color, and the position. By the way, the position in Y is specified, but depending on the length of the name, the position of the time is going to have to move. For example, if this was a long name, the time might be over here, but here the time is going to be right next to it over here. So I only give the Y coordinate as sort of a fixed variable, and the spacing that I want between the name and the beginning of the time is going to be 25 pixels. Then I need to compute the actual position of the time depending on the length of the name. So for that, I get the first position of the name. So that would be like the coordinate right here. I add whatever the length of Billy is in this particular name font. So remember, name font is this thing here that it knows the size and it knows the font. When you give the value Billy to that, right, and gets the length, it knows exactly how many pixels that is. So it takes this position here plus the number of pixels plus the spacing. So that gives me to here. Once I add those two, when I add the spacing, 25 more pixels, I end up over here. So that's the X position, and the Y position is time position Y. So that will be like how high it is here. The time that I actually print is the current time on the computer. So datetime.datetime.now, that accesses the current hour. And I take modulo 12 because I don't want like 1845, right? I want it to be like 6:45 p.m. or a.m., for example. And then I also give the minute as well. And so even if it's a.m., it will print p.m., but it doesn't really matter. This is getting very picky about things. You could write a function that determines whether you're a.m. or p.m., but for the purpose of the videos, I don't think people are picky enough to care if it's a.m. or p.m. And so that's how I get my time text, and then my time font is going to be Whitney medium as well with the right font size. Then I also add this text to the template using all the parameters that I specified above. And sure enough, when I look at the template, I have Billy and then the time right next to his name. And it's spaced 25 pixels after it. So then we can start to add messages to this image here. And we want to possibly include emojis. That's why I included the Pillmoji library, which I think is very useful. So here I take the message X. That's going to be, of course, the X coordinate of where I want the message. The initial Y position of the message. So remember, there could be multiple messages per screenshot here. And so 130 is going to be the Y location of the first message. But then as I send more and more messages, the Y position will need to go down, right? The delta Y, so the pixel spacing between messages in Y is going to be 80 pixels. Then my positions, right, of each message, well, they're all going to have the same X position. And the Y position is going to be whatever the initial position was, so 130 plus I times delta Y. So this, of course, is list comprehension. So this will give like 130, 210, 290. It will just space those up like this. And then the X position will always be the same. So the maximum number of messages I have here is 5 messages. That's fine. The font color, again, it's going to be not quite white. It's actually a little bit gray, I've noticed in Discord. And the font size will be 50. It's the same font size as the name. Also, the font type is slightly different for the messages I found as well. So in this case, it's Whitney Book, which I also have here in the fonts that I've downloaded. So I can run this, and here I actually have a message that includes an emoji that I basically copied and pasted from Discord. So I can run this, and I have a message. And then what it does is this loop here will loop through all the messages in this list. Well, in this case, I just have a single message. And it uses Pillmoji to take this message, which includes an emoji, and put it on top of the image from the Pillow library. So it opens the template object, which is that large rectangle that we've added all the stuff to. And this is the sort of notation you would use with Pillmoji. And then you add text, right? And so we give the message positions. So in this case, I is only 0 because I have a single message. Message.strip. So that will strip this message because, of course, this is an emoji. It strips it into, I think, UTF-8. You give the right font color, and then you give the message font as well. So the message font is Whitney Book. And I can run this and it will put all the messages that I want on my image. So then I can look at the template again and I have the profile picture, the name, the time, and the message. And so basically everything is all good. So suppose now I have an image that has multiple messages on it. Well, now I need the template to actually be bigger, right? And so here I choose world heights 1, but suppose I had 3 messages, right? Then I would want the third element in this array, indexed by 2, of course. And so now I create a new template, and when I look at this template, it's going to be slightly bigger, right? Now it's going to have room for multiple messages. And so now let's actually add multiple messages. So here I'll put here. Yeah, so now I have 3 different messages that will be sent. And when I loop through this code now, it will loop through every message in this array and print it in the right location on the template. So now I have the profile picture, the name, the time, and everything fits properly on the template. So now I have the basic tools established so I can actually loop through a script file and automatically generate these messages. Some other features before we get to that though, you'll notice that when I ran the script, there was some code that prompted a user to select a file on their computer, and then that file path is sort of saved in Python. So that is basically just this code here from tkinter. So if I run this code, of course, there's a file dialog and it's asking to open a file name. So you click on a file on your computer and it will get that file name. So if I run this cell, it appears on my other monitor. I'm going to drag it over here. I can select whatever file I want, for example, this picture here in this particular directory, and open it. And now if I look at file name, it actually gives me the location on that computer where the file is stored. I'm going to run this again, and I'm actually going to choose the script file. So now it's going to have that saved as the file name, and I can open the file name and get all the lines in that file. So if I look here, now I have opened my text file. It's the script file of a particular video. It was the last video I posted. And you can see that the lines are all opened correctly. So I've defined a function here. This function basically does everything that I talked about above. It takes in a messages array, which is the number of messages you want to print on a particular image. It takes in the name of the person who's saying the messages. It takes in the time you want to print, and it takes in the profile picture. And so this function will basically automatically, it'll sort of encompass everything we've talked about above and will generate a file. So once I have this, then I need to create a loop that loops through the entire script, takes the messages and puts them on the appropriate images. So the first thing I need to do is I need to have access to all the profile pictures of everybody who's speaking in the script. And so for that, I open the JSON file and I get a dictionary of names and the corresponding images. So for example, here's the names and here's the images of where they're stored in that directory. The next thing I do this in the script as well, is I create a chat folder. You'll notice when you download this, there actually isn't a chat folder there, but because I've ran this already, there's a chat folder that's been created, and that's where all the images are stored. And so I make a directory called chat, like this. Of course, it won't let me because there's already one that exists. And then what I do is I loop through all the messages and save the images. So the way this works is, it might not be the most efficient way, but it's a way that sort of worked for me. And it depends heavily on the structure of lines here. You'll notice that the way the script works is there's always a name and then a colon, then all the messages that person wants to say, and then a blank line. And then there's other lines as well. If a line has a hashtag in it, then it's supposed to be ignored by the interpreter, kind of like a comment in Python. And so I use this structure of the script to write the for loop efficiently. So the first thing I have is I have this Boolean flag, name up next. That basically means within the loop, the next line that it's going to access is a line that includes somebody's name. And so how do I know that? Well, I know that you begin with a name, obviously. And I know that if there's ever a blank line, the next line is going to have somebody's name. So I use that. I start with the current time on my system. The current name is none because that will get updated every time there's somebody's name. The current lines, that's the number of lines that you want to print on a particular image. The message number, that will influence how the files are saved because I need a different name for each of the files, like 001, 002, for example. And then DT. So DT is something that every time a message is sent, we say that 30 seconds has passed so that you don't get all the messages sent at like 6:15, for example. If you look here, the first message is at 1:14 and then later on it's at 1:20. So we'll actually accumulate the time throughout the video. So I loop through all the lines in my script and I say, well, if the line is empty, the next line is going to contain a name. and I reset all the lines. So like anything that's been built up before in this current lines array goes empty again. And I continue, so I go to the next loop of the for loop. Any line that contains a hashtag, I also continue because that's not something I want to deal with. That's something that I would give myself in the script to remember to do while I'm editing the video. If I'm currently on a name line, I update the current name with, well, I remove basically the semicolon, and then I say name up next equals false, because the next lines, of course, are going to be the text of that person. Otherwise, right, I'm looping through all the lines. I append line to the current lines. I generate the image, so that's the sort of PNG image that I'm talking about, and we just went over in the video, and I save it to a particular file. Then I update the time so that each time a message is sent, it goes up by 30 seconds. In this case, that's something that I chose here. And then I add 1 to the message number because, of course, I want these all to be saved as a different file. Now, all this information that I've gone over in this script is contained in the generate.py file here. It's got all the functions here for generating everything we need. And it sort of, when it runs, it will do this and it will save all these images in a chat folder.